A rare orchid, an impossible clue, a deadly truth. Welcome to Mystery Case. I am your host, Detective Echo. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Into the mystery. If you want a quiet morning in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, you don't ring the bell at 10:30 with a cardboard orchid box under your arm. You stand on the sidewalk and reconsider your life. That's my theory, and it's why I wasn't smiling when Fritz opened the door and said, "Mild as milk. Mr. Wolfe will see him, Archie." Wolfe had said from the top of the stairs that he would not be interrupted. He repeated it often because if there is a thing he can do with vigor, it is refusing. At 10:30 the bell rang, and Fritz, traitor in apron strings, admitted the caller with the serene confidence of a man who thinks Providence will mop up. And the visitor stepped into the hall without waiting for an invitation. He was trim, late 40s, neat to the point of irritation, with a face trained to keep its emotions clipped short like hedges. The box he carried was vented and taped and stamped. This end up in black letters that took no nonsense. "I'm Lowell Harker," he said, as if the name ought to unlock doors. "I must speak with Nero Wolfe." "You can speak with me," I told him. "Archie Goodwin. I do the talking while Mr. Wolfe does the thinking and the eating." His eyes flicked to the stairs, measuring distance, deciding if he could bull through. He couldn't. Not with me there. He exhaled once. Controlled. "This concerns an orchid." "Most things do with Wolfe," I said. "Come in before he remembers how much he hates surprises." I took him to the office, and Wolfe was in his red leather chair. He did not rise. He did not nod. He didn't even blink in greeting. His fingers turned a page of a book he wasn't reading. Harker stood by my desk with the orchid box like an offering. "Mr. Wolfe." "You are interrupting me," Wolfe said. "Not loud, just final." "That is discourteous." "My discourtesy is compelled." Harker set the box down. "An orchid has appeared that cannot exist." That got Wolfe's eyes off the page. "Nonsense is common. You have brought some to my house." "It is not nonsense." His voice stayed clipped, but his fingers worried the tape as if the tape were guilty. "I manage the Van Buren Conservatory collection. We keep records. Lineage. Provenance. Every cross is documented. 2 days ago, one of our cases held a specimen labeled Vanda coerulea, variety imperialis. The tag is genuine, and the plant is genuine, but the variety is impossible." Wolfe leaned back half an inch. "Impossible. It matches a plate from an 1893 monograph," Harker said, and anger slipped through his polish. "That plate has been a joke among botanists for a century." The painter exaggerated. The color was romanticized. The variety was never verified, an orchid that should not exist. Yet it is in our case, blooming, and someone has already offered to buy it for an obscene sum. "Who?" I asked. "A broker," Harker said. "He claims to represent a private collector. He will not name the client. He says the client believes the orchid was stolen decades ago and wants it returned quietly. He also says if we do not cooperate, questions will be raised about our acquisitions, about my management." Wolfe's gaze settled on the box. "Open it." I'd seen Wolfe react to bad cigars, to incompetent policemen, even to a threatened menu, but orchids are different. They are his religion. When something botanical walks in uninvited, it isn't a client anymore. It's heresy, and Wolfe becomes a bishop with a warrant in hand. Harker did carefully, like a man unwrapping a bomb. Inside, nestled in tissue and moss, was a potted plant with stiff, glossy leaves and a spike of blossoms the color of a summer sky after rain. Even I could see it wasn't ordinary. It had presence. It looked like a lie told by nature. Wolfe did not touch it. His nostrils flared. His eyes, pale and implacable, took it in the way a judge takes in a confession. "It is a Vanda," he said. "It is also trouble." "Yes," Harker said quickly, "and it has entered my institution. I've been advised to call the police. Aunt, bring it here. I stared. Wolfe closed his book with a soft thump. You have done well to bring it here. I stared. Wolfe volunteering to host a strange plant in his office was like a saint volunteering for temptation. You will take the case? Harker asked. Wolfe's eyes shifted to me. Archie, call Inspector Kramer. Now? I asked. Now, Wolfe said. Also call Saul Panzer and instruct Fritz that the orchids upstairs are not to be approached by any person in this house who is not named Fritz Brenner or Nero Wolfe. Harker stood very still. Mr. Wolfe, why would someone place it in our case? Wolfe looked at him as if the answer were printed on the man's forehead. Because, Mr. Harker, they wish to force a choice between truth and convenience. And because they have underestimated how seriously I take my orchids. That was the hook. It had barbs. Kramer did not enjoy being summoned to the brownstone as if he were a delivery boy, and he enjoyed it less when orchids were involved. By 11:20, he was in Wolfe's office, hat shoved back, coat unbuttoned, scowl adjusted to fit the room. What is it this time? He demanded. If it's another argument about plant import licenses, I'll have you both hauled in for disturbing my digestion. It concerns a botanical anomaly, Wolfe said, and a possible fraud with implications of blackmail. Kramer's eyes moved to the plant on the corner of Wolfe's desk. That blue thing? That blue thing, I said, may be worth enough to buy you a new digestion. Harker had remained, perched on the yellow chair as if it might eject him. He repeated his account, tighter now under Kramer's stare. The conservatory, the impossible variety, the anonymous broker, the suggestion of scandal. Kramer grunted. So somebody plants a fancy flower in your glass house and offers to buy it back before anyone asks where it came from. Sounds like a stunt. Why not just throw it out? Harker went pale. Destroy it? Inspector, if it is genuine. If it is genuine, Wolfe cut in, it represents either a botanical breakthrough or a historical theft. In either case, destruction would be idiocy. Kramer looked at Wolfe. And what's it to you? Wolfe's lips compressed. The integrity of orchid lineage is not a trivial matter, nor is the possibility that someone is manipulating a respected institution to conceal a crime. I dislike manipulation. That makes two of us, Kramer said dryly. All right. Who's got access to this conservatory? Harker hesitated a fraction too long. I saw it. So did Wolfe. Answer him, Wolfe said softly. Our senior horticulturist, Dr. Elaine Porter. 2 assistants, Michael Litton and Carla Ruiz. The night security is handled by a contractor, but the orchid cases are locked. Only the 3 of us have keys. And you, I said. Yes, and I. Kramer nodded. Any of them likely to cook up a rare flower for profit? It cannot be cooked up, Harker snapped, then mastered himself. Hybridization takes years. Decades, sometimes. Unless, Wolfe murmured. The plant was cultivated long ago. Silence held that for a second. Kramer shifted. All right, I'll have a man take statements. But unless there's a body under that pot, I'm not launching a crusade. There may be reputations under it, Wolfe said, which are sometimes more fragile. Kramer snorted, but he didn't refuse. He left with a warning look at Wolfe that meant he would not tolerate games. That was optimistic of him. When the door shut, Wolfe turned to Harker. You will arrange for Dr. Porter, Mr. Litton, and Miss Ruiz to come here this afternoon. Individually. You will inform them that I have been retained to investigate the provenance of the orchid and the attempted purchase. You will not warn them further. Harker swallowed. They won't like it. I am indifferent to their preferences. And the broker? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. You will also provide Archie with the broker's name and contact information. His name is Victor Dane, Harker said. He operates privately. He approached us through a trustee. Which trustee? Bernard Klein. Wolfe's eyes narrowed a shade. You omitted that. I didn't think it relevant. Everything is relevant, Wolfe said, especially omissions. Harker flushed. Mr. Klein funds a wing of the conservatory. He collects rare plants. He denies knowledge of the orchid's origin, but urged us to consider the offer. And the offer, I prompted. $500,000. I let out a low whistle. Even Wolfe's brows twitched. For a plant that cannot exist, Wolfe said. Interesting. Harker leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, I swear to you, I did not authorize anything improper. Our records are meticulous. Wolfe studied him. Meticulous records can conceal meticulous lies. Harker stiffened. Are you accusing me? I am considering you, Wolfe corrected. That is not yet an accusation. There it was. The disturbance. Outsiders in his office. Money in the air. Reputations on a wire. The brownstone felt less serene, like a chessboard with unfamiliar pieces placed on it. Wolfe shifted his attention to me. Archie, you will visit the conservatory at once. Examine the case in which the plant appeared. Speak to Dr. Porter and the assistants informally before they attend here. Observe their reactions to the suggestion that the orchid may be fraudulent. And Victor Dane? I asked. After, Wolfe said. First the ground, then the broker. Harker rose. I'll return and make the arrangements. You will leave the plant, Wolfe said. Harker hesitated. You brought it for my inspection. It remains. After a heartbeat, Harker nodded. Very well. When he had gone, I leaned back. You're taking this personally. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, as if the world had inconvenienced him. And an orchid labeled with a lie is an offense. Either it is genuine and has been concealed for decades, or it is counterfeit and designed to provoke avarice. In either case, someone seeks to profit from deception. And you don't like being used as part of the scenery. His eyes opened. Correct. I looked at the blue blossoms again. They were serene, almost smug. If they were a fraud, they were a bold one. You think it was planted recently? I asked. Yes. To what end? Wolfe's voice was calm, but there was iron under it. To force a sale, or to expose a theft? The question is, whose theft? That was the next piece on the board, and I was the one who had to go outside and find it. The Van Buren Conservatory occupied a glass and iron structure that looked as if it had been designed by a man who distrusted walls. Sunlight poured through panes that had probably witnessed more botanical ambition than a dozen gardens combined. Inside, the air was warm, damp, and faintly perfumed. The kind of atmosphere that makes you feel you should whisper or photosynthesize. Lowell Harker met me at the entrance with the expression of a man who had slept badly and blamed chlorophyll. They're expecting you, he said. I prefer surprises, I told him. But I'll adapt. He led me through rows of orchids arranged with military precision. Each specimen bore a neat tag, Latin names in tidy script. If a plant so much as leaned to the left, it did so deliberately. The case in question stood near the rear, a glass enclosure with its own lock. An empty space in the second tier marked where the impossible Vanda had been. That's where it appeared? I asked. Yes, Harker said. Tuesday morning. It was not there Monday evening. Who closed up Monday? Dr. Porter. And Tuesday morning? Carla Ruiz opened? Any sign of forced entry? No. I crouched, studying the case. The lock showed no scratches. The shelves were clean, too clean. I ran a finger along the glass edge. No dust disturbed. You dust these daily? I asked. Of course. Of course, I echoed. A woman approached from the adjoining aisle. Tall, early 40s, dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense twist. Her eyes were steady, assessing. This would be Dr. Elaine Porter. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I understand you're investigating our botanical miracle." "Or our botanical joke," I said, "depending on how it shakes out." Her mouth curved faintly. "Science rarely accommodates miracles." "That's what I keep telling people." Harker cleared his throat. Dr. Porter was the last to inspect the case Monday. "I logged the specimens at 6:30, she said. "Everything accounted for. The Vanda was not among them." "And Tuesday morning?" "Carla called me at 8. She was excited." "Excited?" I asked. She thought she'd discovered something historic. "Did you?" Her gaze flicked to the empty space. "For 12 minutes. Then I began to worry. About authenticity. About provenance," she said. "No plant simply materializes, unless someone places it there." "Precisely." Her tone was level, but there was tension under it, like wire drawn tight. A young man approached, sandy-haired, mid-30s, carrying a clipboard as if it were armor. Michael Litton, by elimination. He nodded to Harker, then to me. "You're from Wolfe's office," he said. "That's right." He glanced at the case. "It's extraordinary." "You sound disappointed," I said. He flushed. "I'm a botanist. I would prefer discovery to scandal." "Scandal pays better," I offered. "Not in our field." I studied him. His hands were steady, but his eyes moved often. To Porter, to Harker, back to the case. "And Carla Ruiz?" I asked. "She's in propagation," Porter said. "I'll fetch her." While she went, I circled the case again. "Keys?" I asked. Harker produced his. Litton did the same. Porter, returning with a petite woman in her 20s with sharp eyes and soil on her cuffs, held hers up without being asked. "Carla Ruiz," she said. "I found it." "You're the lucky one," I said. "Tell me how." "I open at 7:30, she said. "I check humidity, temperature. When I got to this case, I saw the bloom immediately. It was too blue." "Too blue?" She nodded. "Vanda coeruleum is blue, but this shade, this saturation, it was like the illustration in Reichenbach's plate." "You've seen the plate?" "I studied it in school. Everyone has. It's famous for being wrong." "And you are certain this matched it?" "Yes." "Did you touch it?" "No, I called Dr. Porter." "Before telling anyone else?" Her chin lifted. "Of course." "Anyone with you at opening?" She hesitated. "Security walks through at 7. "Name?" "Evan Morse." "Did he notice anything?" He said no. I made a note to find Evan Morse. "Who benefits?" I asked lightly, "if the conservatory is forced to sell a $500,000 orchid quietly?" No one answered immediately. Harker's jaw tightened. Porter's eyes cooled. Litton looked at his clipboard as if it might supply a hint. Carla watched me. "Mr. Klein urged us to consider the offer," Harker said finally. "Bernard Klein," I said. "Trustee and collector." Porter's mouth thinned. "Klein has strong opinions about access. He believes private collectors preserve specimens better than institutions." "Does he now?" "He has lobbied for sales before," Litton added quickly. "Nothing improper, just persuasive." "And if the orchid were proven stolen property?" I asked. Harker's color drained. "That would be catastrophic. For you, for the conservatory." "Same thing," I suggested. He stiffened. I changed tack. "Who has been working late recently?" "Michael has," Porter said. "We're preparing for an exhibition." Litton bristled. "So have you." "Yes," she agreed calmly. "And Carla?" "I leave at 5, Carla said. Unless there's an emergency." "Like a spontaneous orchid." Her lips twitched despite herself. I let the silence stretch a beat. "I'll need to see your records. Acquisition logs for the past 50 years. "That's absurd," Harker said. "The plant wasn't in our collection before Tuesday." I know, I said. I want to see what isn't there. Porter studied me with new interest. You think this is about something older? I think, I said, that plants don't appear from nowhere. But reputations sometimes try to disappear. Harker's voice was tight. You're implying... I'm implying nothing yet, I said. I'm collecting. I thanked them and asked for a moment alone with the case. They withdrew reluctantly. I bent close to the empty space. On the shelf, faint against the polished wood, was a crescent smudge where a pot had rested. Slightly larger than the Vanda currently occupying Wolfe's desk would require. That meant one of two things. Either the impossible orchid had grown a little in transit, or something else had once stood there, and someone had been careful to clean around it. I stayed crouched a moment longer, studying that faint crescent on the shelf. It wasn't dramatic. No chalk outline, no smoking gun, but it didn't fit. The Vanda currently residing in Wolfe's office had a modest clay pot, elegant but not oversized. The mark in the conservatory case suggested something broader had once occupied that space, something with a heavier base. When I straightened, the others were watching me through the glass, like spectators at an aquarium exhibit. Mr. Harker, I said, what stood here before Tuesday? Nothing, he replied too quickly. That tier was reserved for new acquisitions. Reserved is not the same as empty. It was empty. I opened the case with the key Porter had left in the lock. No one objected, but Litton's jaw tightened. I ran my fingers lightly over the wood again. The crescent was cleaner than the surrounding shelf, as if something had shielded it from the daily wipe-down. You clean around the pots? I asked. Of course, Carla said. We lift them, wipe beneath, replace them. So if nothing stood here Monday night, the shelf would have been uniformly clean. Yes, but it isn't. Silence settled like damp air. Porter stepped closer. What are you suggesting? That something sat here long enough to leave a shadow, I said. Longer than overnight. That's impossible, Harker snapped. We inventory weekly. And daily visual checks, Porter added. Then either your checks are less precise than you believe, I said mildly, or the pot that left this mark was removed before your Monday log. Harker's face reddened. Are you accusing us of concealing another plant? I'm accusing the shelf of having a memory. That earned me a look from Porter that was almost appreciative. I locked the case again. I'd like to see the acquisition logs now. Harker hesitated, then nodded stiffly. This way. We moved to a small office lined with filing cabinets and a computer terminal that looked as if it had been bullied into botanical service. Carla returned to her propagation trays. Litton hovered. Porter remained, arms folded. Harker pulled a drawer and extracted binders. Orchids are catalogued meticulously, he said. Species, variety, date of acquisition, harm donor or source. Let's start with Vanda coeruleum, I said. He flipped pages. Several entries appeared. Standard varieties, donations from estates, exchanges with other institutions. No imperialis. Go back further, I said. 1980s, 70s. We didn't exist before 1964, Harker said. The conservatory was founded then. Then start there. He did. The early pages were yellowed but neat. I skimmed, names of donors, small notes in margins. Nothing exotic beyond the expected. Porter leaned in. You're assuming the impossible variety was once here. I'm assuming, I said, that someone wants you to believe it was. Litton frowned. To force the sale? Or to provoke scrutiny? From whom? Harker demanded. From anyone who might ask how a plant illustrated in 1893 ended up in your case in 2026. He closed the binder with more force than necessary. We have done nothing improper. I hope so, I said. I asked for access to their digital records as well. Harker complied, though each click seemed to cost him something. I searched for gaps, missing accession numbers, abrupt changes in numbering sequences. "There," I said finally. Porter leaned closer. "What?" "Accession 74-118 through 74-122. They jumped to 74-126. Harker stiffened. "Clerical error. 4 consecutive numbers. It happens." "When?" "In the 70s, he said. "Before my tenure." "Who was curator then?" "Harold Bascom." "Still alive?" "No, died in 1998. Porter's eyes narrowed. "Bascom was eccentric." "In what way?" "He favored private arrangements," she said carefully. "He cultivated relationships with collectors, such as Bernard Klein." Harker's head snapped up. "Klein was a young donor then. He admired Bascom." "Did he donate orchids?" "Yes." "Did he receive any?" "That would be—" Harker stopped. "Improper," I suggested. "Unrecorded," Porter said quietly. Lytton shifted. "You think Bascom hid something?" "I think," I said, "that missing numbers in a sequence are like missing teeth. You notice them." Harker ran a hand over his face. "Even if Bascom mishandled something 50 years ago, what does that have to do with this plant appearing now?" "Timing," I said. "The offer from Victor Dane came almost immediately." "Within hours of our internal discussion," Porter said slowly. "Who knew internally?" "The 4 of us, and Mr. Klein, as once we informed the trustees." "So either one of you called the broker," I said, "or someone anticipated your reaction." "No one like that." "I want to speak with Bernard Klein," I said, "and with your security man, Evan Morse." Harker nodded mechanically. As we left the office, Porter touched my sleeve. "If this is about Bascom," she said under her breath, "you should know he kept personal notebooks. They were never entered into the official archive." "Where are they?" "In storage. Uncatalogued." "Show me." Harker overheard. "Those are private papers." "They concern institutional acquisitions," Porter said. "They are relevant." He hesitated, then sighed. "Very well." We descended a narrow stair to a storage room that smelled less romantic than the main floor. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers. Porter located one labeled HB, private, and inside were leather-bound notebooks, edges worn. I opened the first at random, pages of neat script, detailed crosses, experiments, and occasional cryptic remarks. On one page, dated March 14th, 1974, a single line stood out: "VC Imperialis. Secured. K insists on discretion." I looked up. Porter had gone pale. Harker's lips parted without sound. And just like that, the orchid that should not exist had roots that did. For a moment, none of us spoke. Dust motes hung in the thin basement light, drifting with more composure than the 3 people around me. "Read it again," Harker said hoarsely. I did. "VC Imperialis. Secured. K insists on discretion. Dated March 14th, 1974. Porter folded her arms tightly. "That's 2 months before the missing accession numbers." "And K," I said, "like is almost certainly Bernard Klein." Harker shook his head as if the motion could dislodge the implication. "This proves nothing. Secured could mean anything. A cutting, a rumor, or a plant," I said. "One never entered into the official log." Porter leaned closer to the page. "Bascom would never have used shorthand lightly. If he wrote Imperialis, he meant the variety from Reichenbach's plate, which officially never existed." I reminded her. "Officially," she echoed. Harker straightened abruptly. "This notebook is not evidence of theft. Bascom was a romantic. He might have believed he'd recreated the variety through hybridization." "And kept it off the books at Klein's insistence?" I asked. He had no answer for that. I flipped through more pages. There were detailed notes about other species, exchanges with European growers, so complaints about funding. Then, in July of that year, another entry. Transplanted to K greenhouse for protection. Will reclaim when safe. Protection from what? Porter whispered. From trustees? I suggested. From auditors, or from anyone who might question how it was obtained. Harker's voice was tight. If Bascom transferred institutional property to a private collector, then the conservatory has been missing an orchid for 52 years, I said. One worth $500,000, apparently. And someone, Porter added, has just returned it. We all thought the same thing then. If the plant in Wolfe's office was the same specimen noted in Bascom's hand, it had lived quietly in Bernard Klein's greenhouse for decades. Until now. Why return it? Harker asked. Leverage, I said. Or guilt. Or blackmail, Porter said. See, Bascom died in 1998, I said. Klein is still very much alive. Harker drew a breath. You must not confront him with this without caution. He funds nearly 30% of our operating budget. That, I said, is precisely why someone might want this exposed. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Michael Litton appeared, hesitating at the threshold. Is everything all right? No, Harker snapped. Litton's gaze dropped to the open notebook. You found something. I closed the cover. We found history. He swallowed. Does it involve Mr. Klein? It might, Porter said evenly. Litton looked from one face to another. This is dangerous. For whom? I asked. For all of us, he said. His anxiety didn't feel theatrical. It felt personal. Mr. Litton, I said, how long have you worked here? 6 years. And in that time has Mr. Klein ever requested access outside normal channels? He hesitated. He visits. Frequently. He has keys to certain areas. Keys? Harker demanded. To the main hall, Litton said quickly. Not the orchid cases. Porter's eyes sharpened. You never mentioned that. It's not unusual for major donors, he said defensively. Unusual or not, I said, did he ever show particular interest in Vanda Coeur-Roulea? Litton's fingers tightened on his clipboard. He admires blues. That wasn't the question. He looked away. Last month he asked whether we had ever acquired Imperialis. I thought he was joking. And what did you say? That it was a myth. Did you tell anyone about that conversation? No. Not even Dr. Porter? He shook his head. Porter's expression cooled several degrees. So, I said, a month ago, Klein inquires about a mythical orchid documented in 1974 as having been transferred to his greenhouse. 2 days ago, that orchid appears in your case. Hours later, a broker representing an anonymous collector offers to purchase it quietly. Does that sequence feel accidental? No, Porter said. Harker sank onto a crate. If Klein has orchestrated this, or if someone has orchestrated it against him, I said. We all considered that. If Bascom gave him the plant privately, Porter said slowly, and Klein kept it all these years, returning it now could be an attempt to cleanse the record. Before someone else reveals it, I said. Like Victor Dane, Harker muttered. Which brings us, I said, to the broker. I slipped the notebook into my briefcase. Harker started to object, then stopped. I'll return it, I said. But Mr. Wolfe will want to see this entry. You're taking it to him, Harker asked. Immediately. And Klein? I'll arrange to see him this afternoon. Porter met my eyes. Be careful. He's charming when he needs to be. I prefer charm to orchids that materialize out of thin air, I said. As we climbed back to the main floor, I felt the shape of the case shifting. It wasn't just about a plant that shouldn't exist. It was about an arrangement made in 1974 between an eccentric curator and an ambitious donor, an arrangement buried in missing accession numbers and private greenhouses. And now someone had unearthed it. The question was whether Bernard Klein had decided to correct a half-century-old impropriety, or whether someone had decided to correct it for him. Either way, the orchid on Wolfe's desk was no accident. It was a message. So when I intended to ask the man who insisted on discretion exactly what he thought he was buying. Bernard Klein received me in a greenhouse that made the conservatory look municipal. It sprawled behind his townhouse like a private Eden, arched glass, climate-controlled, orchids arranged with the kind of taste that suggests both money and obsession. He was in his late 70s, silver-haired, compact, with the erect posture of a man who refused to concede ground to age. His handshake was dry and deliberate. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "I understand you represent Nero Wolfe, an excellent choice. He appreciates orchids." "He appreciates the truth about them even more," I said. Klein smiled faintly. "Truth is a matter of cultivation." We walked between benches heavy with blooms. I let him lead. Men like Klein prefer to feel in control of their terrain. "You've heard about the Vanda Coerulea variety imperialis at the conservatory," I began. "I have," he said. "An astonishing development. You seemed less astonished when you asked about it last month." He paused half a step. "Ah, so Michael mentioned that." "He did." Klein resumed walking. "I asked out of curiosity. The variety is legendary." "Legendary enough to warrant discretion in 1974? He stopped this time, turned. The smile vanished. "I beg your pardon?" I opened my briefcase and withdrew a photocopy of the notebook page. I'd made it at a copy shop 2 blocks from the conservatory before coming here. "Insurance." He read the line without touching the paper. "Where did you obtain this?" "From Harold Bascom's private notebooks, V.C. Imperialis, secured.K. Insists on discretion." "That K wouldn't happen to be you, would it?" His eyes, pale and sharp, lifted to mine. Bascom was a dear friend. And he was prone to dramatics in his notes. Did he secure Imperialis in 1974? Klein turned away, walked to a bench, adjusted the angle of a pot by a fraction of an inch, buying time. "There was," he said finally, "a specimen he believed to be Imperialis. He was not certain, but certain enough to keep it off the books." He faced me again. "The trustees in those days were Philistines. They would have forced its sale or destroyed it as a fraud. Harold wished to protect it. So he transplanted it to your greenhouse. At his request, I agreed to house it temporarily." "Temporarily," I repeated. Klein's jaw tightened. He intended to reclaim it once he had proof. "Did he?" "No." "And after his death?" Klein's gaze drifted over the orchids. "It remained. I continued his work. Without informing the conservatory. It was safer that way." "For whom?" "For the plant." I let that sit. "And now," I said, "after 52 years, the plant appears in the conservatory case. Hours later, a broker named Victor Dane offers to buy it quietly on behalf of an anonymous collector who claims it was stolen decades ago." Klein's expression did not change, but something in his shoulders stiffened. "You're suggesting I arranged this?" "I'm asking whether you returned it." "I did not." "Did you authorize Dane?" "I know Victor Dane," he said carefully. "He handles acquisitions for serious collectors, and I did not instruct him to approach the conservatory. But he knew about the plant." "Only recently." "How recently?" Klein hesitated. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago you told him you possessed Imperialis." I consulted him about valuation. Klein said coolly, hypothetically. And then, he said, "the plant disappeared." That landed. "Disappeared," I repeated, "from this greenhouse. I discovered it missing 2 days before it appeared at the conservatory." "Why didn't you report that?" "To whom?" he snapped. The police, and explained that I had housed an undocumented specimen for half a century. So instead you remained silent. Yes, and allowed a broker to approach the conservatory. I did not authorize that, he insisted. If Dane acted, not he did so independently, on information you provided. I trusted him. I studied him. The indignation felt genuine. So did the calculation. Who has access here? I asked. My head gardener, 2 assistants, and occasionally Dr. Porter. Porter? She has visited to consult on certain hybrids. Does she know about Imperialis? She suspected. She never saw it. Did anyone else know of its existence? Klein considered. Harold told one other person, I believe. Who? Michael Lytton. I blinked. Lytton wasn't even born in 1974. He was a graduate student in the 90s, Klein said. Harold mentored him. He showed him the plant once, swore him to secrecy. That shifted the board. So Lytton knew, I said slowly, that Imperialis existed, and that it was here. Yes. And he works at the conservatory now. He does. And 3 weeks ago you mentioned the plant to Victor Dane. Yes. Who then, within weeks, approached the conservatory with an offer. Klein met my eyes. You see why I did not go to the police? I did, but that didn't clear him. One more question, I said. When you discovered the plant missing, was there any sign of forced entry? No. So someone with access removed it? Yes. And 2 days later it appeared in the conservatory case? Yes. I closed my briefcase. Mr. Klein, I said, either someone is attempting to expose a 50-year-old impropriety by returning the evidence, or someone is attempting to profit from it by creating a crisis. And which do you believe? He asked. I believe, I said, that someone underestimated Nero Wolfe. His eyes flickered at that. As I left the greenhouse, I ran the sequence again in my head. Bascom secures Imperialis in 1974, transfers it to Klein. Lytton learns of it decades later. 3 weeks ago, Klein consults Dane. 2 days before the plant appears at the conservatory, it vanishes from Klein's greenhouse. That meant the person who placed it in the conservatory had known where it was, and had keys. By the time I reached the brownstone, it was nearing 6, and Wolfe was installed behind his desk with the blue Vanda positioned at a precise angle to the lamp. He did not look up when I entered, which meant he had been waiting. Well, he said. Klein admits Bascom secured Imperialis in 1974 and transferred it to his greenhouse for protection, I told him. He kept it there for 52 years. 3 weeks ago, he mentioned it to Victor Dane for valuation. 2 days before the plant appeared at the conservatory, it disappeared from his greenhouse. Wolfe's eyes shifted to the orchid. And he denies returning it. Flatly. Do you believe him? I believe he didn't expect it to surface like this. Whether that makes him innocent is another matter. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Who knew of the plant's existence? Bascom, Klein, and according to Klein, Michael Lytton. Wolfe's brows rose a millimeter. Lytton. Bascom mentored him in the 90s, showed him the plant, swore him to secrecy. And Lytton now works at the conservatory. Senior horticulturist. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Convenient. There's more, I said. Now, the shelf in the conservatory case where the plant appeared had a crescent mark, larger than the pot currently holding the specimen, meaning something else sat there long enough to leave an imprint. Ah. And accession numbers from 1974 are missing. 4 in sequence. Wolfe nodded once. Bascom concealed the original acquisition. Looks that way. Archie, Wolfe said, opening his eyes. What is the simplest explanation? That Lytton stole the plant from Klein, placed it in the conservatory case, tipped off Dane, and hoped to force a sale that would implicate Klein while enriching himself. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Motive? Money or institutional revenge? If he resented Klein's influence. Does he? He's nervous. Protective of Klein in odd ways. Wolfe grunted softly. And Doctor. The porter? She knew nothing of the plant's presence in Klein's greenhouse, but she suspected Bascom kept private arrangements. Does she possess keys to Klein's greenhouse? Yes, she has consulted there. And Carla Ruiz? No known access to Klein's property. Wolfe considered. The broker, Victor Dane, what is his posture? Smooth. Claims a private client believes the orchid was stolen decades ago and wishes quiet restitution, which suggests knowledge of the 1974 transfer. Or a guess, I said, if someone discovered the notebook entry. Wolfe's eyes flicked to the photocopy on his desk. Who has seen Bascom's notebooks? Harker, Porter, Litton, and me. And before today? Unknown. Wolfe was silent a long moment. Then, the crescent mark on the shelf, larger than this pot. Yes. Then the plant originally placed in the conservatory case was not this one. I blinked. You think this isn't the same specimen from Klein's greenhouse? Wolfe's lips twitched faintly. Examine it. I stepped to the desk and bent over the vanda. The blossoms were magnificent, saturated blue with delicate veining. The pot was clay, modest, recently cleaned. What am I looking for? I asked. Age, Wolfe said. I examined the roots through the slits in the pot. They were healthy, pale green, vigorous. It looks robust, I said. Too robust, Wolfe murmured. A plant cultivated for 50 years in a private greenhouse would show different characteristics. Scarring from repotting, variations in growth pattern. This specimen is comparatively young. How young? 5 years, perhaps 6. I straightened slowly. So someone cultivated a new imperialis. Or a convincing facsimile, Wolfe said. But Klein's original may still be missing. The pieces shifted again. If Litton saw the original in the 90s, I said, he could have attempted to replicate it. Hybridization takes years. Yes. And 3 weeks ago, when Klein mentioned the original to Dane, Litton might have realized exposure was imminent. And decided, Wolfe said softly, to control the narrative. By stealing the original from Klein, I said, and placing his own cultivated specimen in the conservatory case. Then alerting Dane to approach with an offer, framing it as restitution of stolen property. Thus, Wolfe continued, forcing Klein either to admit the 1974 arrangement or to purchase silence. And if the conservatory sold the plant quietly, I added. Litton could profit through Dane. Wolfe nodded. Precisely. But what about the crescent mark? I asked. You think the larger pot belonged to the original? Yes. Litton may have placed the original briefly in the case, then replaced it with his younger specimen once he realized the size discrepancy would be noticed. Or, I said slowly, someone else intervened. Wolfe's gaze held mine. Indeed. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Wolfe did not move. Archie. I went. Fritz admitted Dr. Porter. She looked composed, but her eyes were bright with something close to alarm. Mr. Wolfe, she said as I ushered her in, there has been another development. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. Speak. Michael Litton has not come home, she said. And the original imperialis, Mr. Klein's specimen, has been found. Where? I demanded. In the conservatory, she said. In the propagation room, its pot broken, the roots damaged. Wolfe's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room dropped. And Mr. Litton? He asked. He left the conservatory an hour ago, Porter said. He took his car. No one knows where he is. Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the desk. Archie, he said, call Saul Panzer. The game had tightened, and someone had just made a desperate move. Saul Panzer does not waste time on astonishment. When I reached him and outlined the essentials, missing horticulturist, damaged orchid, possible blackmail, he said only, "Address," and hung up before I finished spelling it. Dr. Porter remained standing in Wolfe's office, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "The original is definitely Mr. Klein's specimen?" I asked her. "Yes," she said. "He came himself when we called. He identified a scar along the lower stem from a repotting accident years ago. It matches his description exactly." "And it was in the propagation room," I said. "Not in the display case?" "Hidden behind seed trays, as if someone meant to retrieve it later." Wolfe's eyes were half closed. "Describe the damage." "The pot was smashed. Not dropped, struck. The roots were exposed and roughly handled. It will survive, but only if treated immediately." Wolfe nodded once. "Fritz." Fritz appeared as if conjured. Wolfe gave quiet instructions regarding humidity, substrate, and sterilized tools. Within minutes, the wounded orchid was installed in a temporary arrangement near Wolfe's desk, and he regarded it with the severity of a surgeon assessing a colleague's botched operation. "This," Wolfe said softly, "is the true Imperialis. The younger specimen, the one first brought from the conservatory, sat on a side table. Its blue blooms were nearly identical, but now that I knew to look, I saw differences. The veining was slightly less intricate, the lip broader. 2 plants, I said. One 52 years old, one perhaps 6. Correct. Dr. Porter drew a breath. Michael has been working on a private hybridization project for years. He used unused greenhouse space after hours. I assumed it was harmless experimentation. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. You did not inspect it? I trusted him. That, Wolfe said, was unwise. The doorbell rang again. Saul entered without ceremony, hat pushed back, expression neutral. I've got Lytton, he said. He's at his apartment. Packing. Packing? I said. Suitcase open on the bed. He says he was planning a weekend away. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Bring him. Saul nodded and departed as efficiently as he had arrived. Dr. Porter sank into the yellow chair. If he has done this, he has, Wolfe said calmly. You're certain? Yes. I looked at him. Walk me through it. Wolfe's fingers interlaced. Michael Lytton knew of the original Imperialis from Bascombe. He also possessed the expertise to attempt a recreation. Over several years he cultivated a hybrid approximating the legendary variety. Porter closed her eyes briefly. 3 weeks ago, Wolfe continued, Klein consulted Victor Dane regarding valuation of the original. Dane, a broker accustomed to profit, recognized opportunity. And he approached the conservatory with an offer framed as restitution of stolen property. Without confirming whether it was stolen, I said. Indeed. Lytton, aware of Klein's possession and perhaps informed indirectly of Dane's inquiry, perceived danger. If the original were publicly acknowledged, his own cultivated specimen would be exposed as derivative. So he stole the original from Klein, Porter whispered. Yes, he had access through prior visits and likely retained a key or obtained entry under pretext. He removed it 2 days before its appearance at the conservatory. And placed his own younger plant in the display case, I said, to initiate the crisis. Correct. The larger crescent mark you observed indicates the original was briefly set there, perhaps to create photographic evidence or to assess fit. Realizing the pot-size discrepancy, he substituted his own specimen. Then hid the original in the propagation room, Porter said slowly, intending to retrieve it later. Yes, Wolfe said. Once the sale was negotiated, or Klein coerced into silence. And the damaged pot? I asked. Wolfe's gaze moved to the injured plant. Panic. When he learned that you had discovered Bascombe's notebook and visited Klein, he recognized that his timeline had collapsed. He attempted to remove the original from the conservatory, likely to return it anonymously or destroy evidence. In haste, he damaged it. Porter's face had gone ashen. He would not destroy it. He would not intend to, Wolfe said. But desperation impairs judgment. The door opened, and Saul returned with Michael Lytton between him and the wall. Lytton's composure had thinned, so his hair was disordered, his eyes rimmed red. "This is absurd," Lytton said. "I haven't done anything criminal." Wolfe regarded him without greeting. "You cultivated a hybrid approximating Vanda Coeur-Roulea variety imperialis." Lytton's jaw clenched. "You learned of the original from Harold Bascombe. You resented Bernard Klein's private possession of it. When Klein consulted Victor Dane, you saw opportunity? You removed the original from Klein's greenhouse, placed your own specimen in the conservatory case, and arranged for Dane to approach with an offer. You intended to force Klein either to acknowledge the 1974 impropriety or to purchase silence. In either event, you would control the outcome." "That's insane," Lytton snapped. Wolfe's voice did not rise. "You then hid the original in the propagation room. Today, realizing exposure was imminent, you attempted to remove it. In your haste, you broke the pot." Lytton's eyes flicked involuntarily to the wounded orchid. There it was. Recognition, not of the plant, but of the mistake. "You're romanticizing this," he said hoarsely. "Bascombe was cheated. The conservatory was cheated. Klein hoarded a discovery that belonged to science." "So you sought justice?" Wolfe asked mildly. "I sought correction," Lytton shot back. "And yes, compensation. I did the work. I recreated Imperialis." Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "You recreated an approximation. This is the original." Silence pressed in. "And you endangered it," Wolfe added. Lytton's shoulders sagged. "I never meant," he began, then stopped. "No," Wolfe said. "You meant to manipulate. You meant to profit from concealed history. You did not mean to damage the plant. That is merely the consequence." Saul shifted slightly closer. Wolfe's gaze moved to Dr. Porter. "You will inform Inspector Kramer. The matter involves theft and attempted fraud." Porter nodded numbly. Lytton looked at the floor. "Klein stole it first?" "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But you compounded the theft with deceit." The room was very still. Outside, the city moved in ordinary rhythms, unaware that two orchids had nearly undone half a century of discretion. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. "The tragedy," he said quietly, "is not that the orchid should not exist. It is that men so often believe they are entitled to what they did not cultivate." I watched Lytton absorb that, and for once I had no quip ready. Inspector Kramer arrived in a temper that suggested he had postponed dinner for this. He took in the room in a single sweep. Saul by the door, Lytton slumped but defiant, Dr. Porter pale, Wolfe immovable behind his desk, and two blue orchids occupying more authority than anyone present. "All right," Kramer said. "Start talking." Wolfe inclined his head toward me. I did the honors, laying out the sequence cleanly. Bascombe's 1974 acquisition and private transfer to Klein, the missing accession numbers, Lytton's knowledge of the original, Klein's recent consultation with Victor Dane, the disappearance of the plant from Klein's greenhouse, the appearance of a younger specimen in the conservatory case, the broker's offer, the discovery of the original hidden and damaged. Kramer listened without interruption, which meant he was either impressed or calculating where to object. When I finished, he looked at Lytton. You deny it?" Lytton's chin lifted. "I took the plant from Klein's greenhouse. Yes, but I intended to return it to the conservatory permanently. It was stolen property." "You're not a judge," Kramer said flatly. "No," Lytton shot back, "but I am a scientist. That plant belonged to the institution. Klein kept it hidden for half a century." Klein, summoned at Wolfe's request, and now seated stiffly near the bookcase, made a sound of restrained fury. I preserved it. Bascombe asked me to. And you never corrected the record, Wolfe said calmly. Klein's lips compressed. Kramer held up a hand. One at a time. Lytton, did you contact Victor Dane? No. Did you tell anyone the plant had been moved to the conservatory? He hesitated. Kramer's eyes sharpened. So you did. I told Dane the conservatory might soon possess something extraordinary, Lytton admitted. I didn't instruct him to make an offer. I just suggested opportunity. There's your attempted fraud, Kramer said. It wasn't fraud, Lytton insisted. If the conservatory sold it, the money would support research. And you? I asked. I would have received a consultant's fee. Wolfe's gaze was steady. And satisfaction. Lytton didn't deny that. Kramer turned to Klein. You admit harboring the plant off the books. Klein's voice was tight but controlled. Harold Bascombe entrusted it to me. The trustees of that era were short-sighted. The plant would have been sold to the highest bidder or dismissed as a fraud. Maybe, Kramer said, but you kept quiet. Yes, for 52 years. Yes, Kramer grunted. That's a long temporary. Klein said nothing. Dr. Porter spoke then, her voice steadier than before. Inspector, whatever Mr. Klein's initial justification, the plant should have been returned long ago. But that does not excuse Michael's actions. He endangered it. Lytton flinched at that more than at anything else. I didn't mean to damage it, he said, almost to himself. But you did, Wolfe said. Kramer rubbed his jaw. All right, theft from Klein's greenhouse, attempted coercion through a broker, concealment of property. We'll sort the charges downtown. He gestured to Saul. I'll take him. Saul stepped aside as Kramer moved to Lytton. Michael, Porter said softly. Lytton looked at her. Whatever righteous fire had fueled him was guttering now. I was going to fix it, he said. You tried to control it, she replied. Sir Kramer led him toward the door. At the threshold, Lytton turned once more toward the orchids. I recreated it, he said. I proved it could exist. Wolfe's voice was mild. Existence is not ownership. The door closed behind them. Silence settled in the office, heavy but not chaotic. The storm had passed. Debris remained. Klein rose slowly. Mr. Wolfe, he said, I will make restitution to the conservatory, financial and otherwise. You will return the original Imperialis formally, Wolfe said, with documentation of its history. Klein inclined his head. Yes, and you will acknowledge Bascombe's role without embellishment. I will. Dr. Porter looked from one to the other. The trustees will not be pleased. They will be relieved, I said. A public scandal would have been worse. Wolfe's gaze moved to the younger specimen on the side table. And Lytton's hybrid? Porter hesitated. It is remarkable in its own right. Then catalogue it honestly, Wolfe said. Under his name. She nodded slowly. Klein regarded the wounded original, now stabilized under Fritz's attentive care. Will it survive? Yes, Wolfe said. It is resilient. Klein drew a long breath, as it should be. When he and Dr. Porter had gone, the office felt restored. The sacred geometry of Wolfe's domain reasserted itself. Desk, chairs, books, orchids. No more intrusions. I dropped into my chair. You knew the younger plant wasn't 50 years old the moment you saw it. Yes. And you let Lytton talk himself into a corner. Yes. I studied the two orchids side by side, the venerable survivor and the ambitious imitation. Funny, I said. All this over a flower that wasn't supposed to exist. Wolfe adjusted the angle of the lamp by a fraction. On the contrary, Archie, it existed quite properly. It was the men who behaved improbably. I grinned. You're going to enjoy dinner. I always do, Wolfe said, "but tonight I shall appreciate the distinction between cultivation and appropriation." Fritz announced that the meal was served. As we rose, I glanced once more at the Imperialis. It had endured secrecy, ambition, theft, and panic, and was still blooming. Some plants, I reflected, don't care who thinks they should not exist, since they simply do. Dinner that night was roast duck with a reduction that made me consider proposing marriage to Fritz, and Wolfe approached it with the solemn gratitude he usually reserves for flawless reasoning. The case, as far as the law was concerned, had resolved itself into paperwork and prosecutorial discretion. Lytton would face charges. How severe depended on how loudly Klein wished to advertise his own half-century indiscretion. Klein, for his part, had already telephoned his attorney and 2 trustees before the soup course, but the orchids remained in Wolfe's office, and that meant the matter was not entirely concluded. After dinner, we returned to the room. Wolfe settled into his chair with the faint exhalation of a man who has balanced appetite and intellect to mutual satisfaction. Now, the original Imperialis had been transported back to the conservatory under Porter's supervision, but the younger hybrid remained, temporarily entrusted to Wolfe for examination before formal cataloguing. I leaned against my desk. "You're not satisfied?" "I'm rarely satisfied," Wolfe said. "It encourages vigilance." "You got your confession?" "Yes." "You restored the plant?" "Yes." "And you extracted a promise of restitution from Klein?" "Yes." "Then what's left?" Wolfe regarded the hybrid thoughtfully. "Intent." Lytton's intent was obvious. "Superficially," Wolfe corrected. "He desired exposure of Klein's concealment and profit from the revelation, but there is a deeper question." I waited. "Why?" Wolfe said. Did he damage the original?" "He panicked. Panic does not select a blunt instrument and strike a pot with sufficient force to shatter it." I frowned. "You think it wasn't accidental?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that desperation may coexist with calculation." Before I could pursue that, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock. Nearly 9. "Archie," Wolfe said. At the door stood Victor Dane, immaculate as ever, a faint sheen of irritation on his polished composure. "I was informed," he said smoothly, "that certain developments have occurred." "That's one way to phrase it," I said. "Come in." He entered the office with a measured glance at Wolfe, then at the hybrid orchid. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "I hope my professional inquiry has not been misconstrued." "It has been understood," Wolfe replied. Dane folded his hands. My client remains interested in the specimen." "The original is no longer available for private negotiation," Wolfe said. "It has been restored to institutional custody." Dane's expression did not flicker. "Unfortunate." "But," Wolfe continued, "there exists a hybrid of similar appearance, cultivated by Mr. Lytton." Dane's eyes shifted to the plant on the side table. For the first time, genuine interest surfaced. "Ah," he murmured. "So that is the one." The words settled heavily. "The one," I repeated. Dane smiled faintly. "The specimen my client was shown photographs of 3 weeks ago." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "By whom?" Dane did not answer immediately. "You were shown photographs," Wolfe pressed, "of a plant matching Imperialis before the original was removed from Klein's greenhouse." "Yes." "By Mr. Lytton." "Yes." There it was. Confirmation, not revelation, but confirmation nonetheless. "And," Wolfe continued, "your approach to the conservatory was not initiated solely on Klein's disclosure." Dane's smile thinned. "Business requires initiative." "You intended," Wolfe said, "to acquire Lytton's hybrid under the guise of reclaiming stolen property." Dane inclined his head slightly. "My client values rarity. Authenticity can be negotiated." I let out a low whistle. "So you didn't care which plant you got?" Only that it could be marketed as the legendary Imperialis, Dane said coolly. Wolfe's eyes hardened. You would have perpetuated the deception. Dane's shoulders lifted minimally. The market determines belief. Not in my presence, Wolfe said. Silence stretched. You were aware, Wolfe continued, as that Klein possessed the original. Yes, and you chose to exploit Litton's ambition. Dane did not deny it. Your client? I asked. Dane's gaze flicked to me. Irrelevant. On the contrary, Wolfe said, if your client encouraged this scheme, he is complicit. Dane's composure shifted a fraction. My client merely expressed interest. In a myth, Wolfe said, which you were prepared to monetize regardless of provenance. Dane's smile returned, thinner now. Mr. Wolfe, the world runs on perception. It also collapses under fraud, Wolfe said. Dane studied him, then the hybrid again. If the original is secured, he said, perhaps there remains opportunity in the recreation. Catalogued honestly, Wolfe said, under Litton's name, without reference to stolen legend. Dane considered. Less profitable. Less criminal, I said. He exhaled softly. Very well. I will advise my client that discretion is no longer viable. You will advise him, Wolfe said, that further interference will invite scrutiny. Dane held Wolfe's gaze for a long moment, then inclined his head. As you wish. When he had gone, I closed the door firmly. Well, I said, that ties the bow. Wolfe shook his head slightly. It tightens it. You think Dane will try something else? He will seek profit elsewhere, Wolfe said. Men like Dane do not abandon appetite. They redirect it. I looked at the hybrid orchid. At least this one will have an honest label. Yes, Wolfe said. And that is sufficient. I sank into my chair. All this over a name on a tag. Wolfe's eyes rested briefly on the empty space where the original had stood. A name, he said quietly, is the first claim of ownership. When it is false, all that follows is corruption. I grinned faintly. You're in a philosophical mood. I am in a reflective one. The brownstone had returned to its accustomed stillness. No more intruders, no more concealed specimens, just the steady lamplight and the faint, clean scent of orchids. Archie, Wolfe said after a moment, remind me tomorrow to instruct the conservatory on proper archival integrity. Gladly. And, he added, settling more deeply into his chair, ask Fritz to ensure that no plant enters this house again without a documented lineage. I laughed. You're not banning miracles, are you? Wolfe closed his eyes. Miracles, he said, require no secrecy. It is men who do. And with that, the orchid that should not exist had finally been granted the one thing it had lacked for 52 years. A truthful name. The morning in the brown stone resumed its disciplined rhythm as though deception had never crossed the threshold. Wolfe spent his customary hours in the plant rooms, and I used the interval to telephone Dr. Porter for an update. The original Imperialis has stabilized, she told me. We've issued a formal statement acknowledging its undocumented history and Mr. Klein's custodianship. The trustees are strained. And Litton? I asked. He has retained counsel. He claims he acted in the institution's best interest. People often do, I said. When Wolfe descended at 11, he took his place behind the desk and regarded me with that particular look which means he has been thinking in peace and expects me to disturb it. Report, he said. I summarized Porter's call and added, Dane has been quiet. He will remain so, Wolfe said, for a time. You're still turning something over, I observed. Yes, Litton confessed. To theft and manipulation, Wolfe said, not to motive. He said he wanted to correct an old wrong. Wolfe's lips tightened slightly. That is rhetoric, not motive. I leaned back. All right, enlighten me. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Consider the sequence. Lytton cultivates a hybrid approximating imperialis over several years. Why? For prestige, for the challenge. Precisely. He desired recognition, yet he concealed the work. He was using conservatory space unofficially. An inconvenience, not an insurmountable one. He could have sought authorization. I frowned, unless he feared comparison with the original. Wolfe inclined his head. He knew the authentic specimen existed in Klein's greenhouse. Like any public presentation of his hybrid would invite scrutiny and exposure of its derivative nature. So he needed the original discredited or displaced. Exactly. I straightened, by stealing it and orchestrating a crisis. Not merely to expose Klein, Wolfe said, but to eliminate the benchmark. I considered the broken pot, the damaged roots. You think he meant to destroy it? I said slowly. Yes. He said he panicked. Panic may accelerate intent, Wolfe replied. When you and I began tracing the 1974 transfer, Lytton recognized that the original would soon be reclaimed formally. Once restored to institutional custody, it would be examined, catalogued, compared. His hybrid would be relegated to imitation. So he retrieved the original from the propagation room and struck the pot deliberately. Wolfe finished. Yes, root damage can be fatal. Had Dr. Porter not intervened promptly, the Imperialis might have perished. I exhaled. And with it, the only proof that his was second. Yes. That's colder than I thought, I admitted. Ambition often is, Wolfe said. The doorbell rang. I answered it to find Bernard Klein, hat in hand, expression less combative than the night before. I will not intrude long, he said as I led him in. I wish to inform Mr. Wolfe that the board has accepted my restitution. The Imperialis will remain permanently at the conservatory, with a plaque acknowledging its full history. Wolfe inclined his head. Appropriate. Klein hesitated. Dr. Porter informed me of your additional conclusion that Lytton intended destruction. Wolfe's gaze was steady. It is the logical inference. Klein's jaw worked. Because then my failure was not merely concealment, it was creating conditions for envy. Your failure, Wolfe said calmly, was believing discretion superior to transparency. Klein absorbed that without protest. I have arranged a grant, he said after a moment, for research in hybridization, under strict documentation. A wise correction, Wolfe said. When Klein had gone, I regarded Wolfe. You've managed to reform a trustee. I have reminded him of consequence. The afternoon passed without disturbance. Near 5, Saul telephoned with confirmation. Lytton had amended his statement, admitting that he struck the pot in anger, telling himself the plant was merely material. The prosecutor would consider the added charge. I relayed this to Wolfe. He nodded once. As expected. You're not pleased, I said. I'm satisfied, Wolfe replied. There is a distinction. Because the plant survived. Because the truth did, he corrected. Evening settled gently over the brownstone. The office, restored to order, held only the younger hybrid now, awaiting transfer. Its blooms were still vivid, still lovely. I studied it. It's almost identical. Yes, but not quite. No, that difference cost Lytton everything. Not everything, Wolfe said. It may yet teach him humility. I grinned faintly. You're optimistic. I am realistic, Wolfe said. Men who mistake imitation for entitlement eventually confront an original. Fritz announced dinner. As we rose, I glanced once more at the hybrid. Funny, I said. For a plant that shouldn't exist, it caused a remarkable amount of damage. Wolfe paused at the threshold. On the contrary, Archie, he said, the orchid existed properly. It was the lies surrounding it that were unnatural. We went to the dining room, where the table was set with the precision of a well-reasoned argument. As I took my seat, I considered the path of the Imperialis, secured in secrecy, hidden in privilege, stolen in ambition, nearly destroyed in panic, and finally restored in truth. Wolfe unfolded his napkin. "Remember this," he said quietly. "Cultivation requires patience. Possession without integrity is merely theft extended over time." I nodded. "I'll engrave it on a flower pot." He gave me a brief dismissive glance, and the brown stone, having endured its disturbance, returned at last to silence, its orchids blooming under honest names, and its master content that intellect, not appetite, had prevailed.